Carla. As well as a horrific pandemic with death and tragic consequences for so many people around the world, we're also living in a real-life experiment. A real-life experiment of what it is to implement the most far-reaching changes possible or imaginable in terms of people's habits. The Minister earlier on spoke about the need for everyone to change their habits. I agree with that. But who could have imagined the kind of changes in people's habits that are currently taking place? Consumption has collapsed. Huge parts of the economy are effectively in cold storage for months. And what's the impact of that in terms of climate change? The projected impact on a global basis is that global emissions will only drop by 8%. Completely inadequate as well as completely unsustainable because of how it's being done. And so what's the conclusion from that? In my opinion, the conclusion is that there is no solution to the climate crisis, which is coming towards us extremely fast and with horrific consequences. There's no solution to that within the framework of the profit system. There's no solution to it as long as the decisions about our economy are made by the big oil companies. There's no solution to it as long as the decisions about the nature of our agriculture are made by big agribusiness. It underlines the desperate need for system change instead of climate change, and in my opinion, it makes the case for that change to be socialist change, whereby the key sections of the economy are on democratic public ownership and that we're able to plan to put people's needs and our planet's needs before profit. To be more concrete, I give an example and a comparison between the drop in electricity usage between the south of Ireland and the north. In the north, electricity consumption has fallen by 20%, but in the south it's only fallen by 10%. And the underlying reason, in a more concrete way, demonstrates that point, that the developmental model that the government has chosen is not sustainable in terms of our environment. Because that 10% difference is made up basically of data centres. It's a core part of government policy to attract big multinational companies to establish data centres here, data centres that provide very little in the way of ongoing jobs. They're expected to add at least 1.5 million tonnes of CO2 annually to our emissions by 2028, but the government designates them as critical infrastructure in order to be able to attract more of them. It demonstrates the government is not putting the interests of our people, is not putting the interests of our planet first. I agree with the slogan of ICTU, no going back, and for me what that speaks to is no going back to a society where it's okay for people to get worse health care because they're poorer. It speaks to the need not to go back to a situation where evictions are legal, and we were told it was unconstitutional to make evictions illegal. Similarly, in terms of increases in rents. But it's also about no going back to the disconnection of people from nature and the kind of pressurised, stressed lives that very many people still have, but that was the norm for almost everybody pre-pandemic. And there's a huge task for the trade union movement and the left to produce a vision and to build a movement to fight for that sort of eco-socialist change that we need. I think that should be based around the idea of a Green New Deal with socialist policies, because I think the interests of climate justice overlap absolutely now with the needs for social justice and the need of how we're going to function safely and in a healthy way in terms of this coronavirus situation. A few quick examples of that. In terms of public transport, we need to be able for people to travel safely, we need massive investment in public transport. That means that private operators are not going to be able to make profit like they did in the past. And in my opinion, it means we should just invest, treat it as a public service and make it free. Free public transport for all and massively expand it. We need a massive increase in the number of care jobs in our society. To be able to teach properly, we need much more teachers. To have proper health care, we need much more doctors, much more nurses. To be able to have proper childcare, more people working in that area. All of that requires a massive investment, increase of care jobs. They're low carbon, quality jobs. Similarly, we need less people to be in crowded workplaces. We need a 4-day week without loss of pay. But the only way will get any of those things is with a movement. They won't come from a Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael government. They require a movement from below.
Thank you very much. Deputy Michael Lowry.